Welcome, everybody. I'm Felix Marquardt. This is the Black Elephant Experience, and today it is my great pleasure to welcome Sabrina Salvati, host of Sabby Sabs on YouTube and other streaming platforms, an activist, an award-winning commentator. Sabby, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Really, I'm delighted. As I told you when we were sort of chit-chatting before the show, I'm really this channel. I'm an American. I'm a bit of a weird creature, both on both sides of the pond, because in America, people very rapidly understand that I wasn't actually born and raised in the U.S., although I carry an American passport. I was born and raised in Paris, although neither my father was a German Austrian and my mom's an American. Anyway, she was from New York, born in the Bronx. I was born in Paris, grew up in Paris. And this show is about, while we're going to have the conversation in English, it's dubbed. And my audience is mostly French or Francophone. And what I'm sort of the purpose of this channel and of this show is to allow people to understand what's going on outside France, because I would argue that French elites have taken advantage of linguistic and cultural barriers to gaslight the French public into thinking that a certain number of things that we are talking about in France represent the Overton window everywhere, which is obviously, as Americans, we know is not the case. So I wanted to have you on because I think, I've been watching you for quite a while, several years, and I've been really impressed by how there's a lot of media in the US that are really stuck in the past, but you really aren't. And so I wanted to have you on because I'd like you to explain to the French public how politics have moved on not for everyone, but for a lot of people who are establishing at least the conversation, like defining the terms of the conversation in independent media. And so maybe we can start. I usually ask everyone if they can tell me two things. One is talk about someone in your family or a friend. They don't have to be alive, whom you often think about when you think of current events. Let's start with that. Welcome.
Thank you. I would say my grandma. My grandmother forewarned me of a lot of the things that we're dealing with today in the United States. My grandma, like she warned me that we would end up going down this road. So she's no longer alive, but my grandma, she experienced a lot of things here in the United States. My grandmother experienced apartheid right here in the U.S. She grew up in the South. She moved from the South to the Deep South, and she moved from the Deep South to Baltimore, Maryland for job opportunities. At the time, she was among many that were fleeing the racial terror that was happening in the South, the Jim Crow South, all of that goes along with it. And she always cautioned me that, yes, there has been progress, but there's still so much to be done. And if the economic situation does not improve for the vast majority of Americans, the working class Americans, which she was, we could possibly see another type of revolt coming. And I think when you look at this through the lens of a class analysis, one of the things that really stand out to me is that my parents grew up poor. My grandma grew up poor, and they're not alone. It's not just them. What I learned from my grandma was that the voices of those that are lower income, those that are poor, and even the working poor, they are not heard. They are ignored. There was a study that was done that came out of Princeton, I believe it's the Gillen study, that showed that the vast majority of electoral politics policy decisions, it is only moved by those who are wealthy. It doesn't move the needle from those that are lower income, those that are poor. So the people who actually see significant results from electoral politics are those who have money. And my grandma experienced that throughout her whole life. So it has come to the point, especially here in the US, I know you're in France, we don't have some of the benefits that you have in France. We don't have universal, everybody doesn't have health care. Everybody doesn't get paid leave, paid sick leave. We don't have that here. And it's basically become a dog eat dog country where everybody's just trying to help um, themselves, and they're trying to do the best that they can for as an individual, or if they have family, they're trying to do the best for their family. They're trying to look out for their own.
Mhm.
What has started to happen, especially since the '08 housing crisis, is that that's not enough anymore because the economy is not moving in our favor. The economy is working well for those who are the ultra rich, the billionaires. These these policies don't impact them the way it impacts us. The gas price is increasing at this current point. They're not impacted. The grocery prices increases, they're not impacted. So when the price of, meat increases, they don't really have to worry about those things because they don't have to look at prices at all. And I think something, what my grandma had warned me about, I see that, coming into place. People who work so hard for their whole life and they're still stuck in poverty. And so I
Mhm.
think that that is the message that I take away from my grandma, that if the economic situation does not improve for those who are poor, those who are working class, then we could possibly see another revolution at some time.
Mhm. And before we dive into that, and the importance of coming back to just class politics, um, also, could you tell us something that people who know you, or that some who know you don't know about you?
I think, well, some people don't know that I did live overseas. Some people don't know that I lived in Germany for 6 years. So I did see the differences. I saw the difference with the economy. I saw the difference with, some of the benefits that people in Germany had that we just don't have here in the United States. I saw Germany create more of a walkability, environment,
Hmm.
where it was more common, even back then, it was more common to see people riding their bikes or walking more. The US, I feel, is just now coming around to that, where they're trying to create these walkable cities and more
Yeah,
bike lanes. Um,
it's actually. Go ahead, go ahead.
I also saw the public transportation there, and how this is another thing. Our infrastructure is greatly lacking here in the United States, whereas in Europe, they have high speed trains where we were able to just get on a train and go from Germany to France or go to Spain. We took a field trip. We went to Spain, and we just still in the United States, we don't have a high speed rail. So as much as you may hear some Americans criticize other countries, I just don't want people to have this belief that everything here is great or so much better. There's a lot of improvements that are needed here, including with public transportation. So there are many
Mhm.
ways where some of these European countries are miles ahead of the United States.
No, I hear you. Actually, I would argue that I would think most people in Europe are vastly aware of the problems that are befalling the US. Their problem is that they think they're so much better because they have the social system right. Like Germany, for instance, has done a lot of things right for its own population, but because of a very strange syndrome that called German guilt pride. It feels that the only way that it can sort of get over its horrific role in the genocide of Jews and Gypsies and others during World War II is to give unconditional support to Israel. And they financed 30%, they've sent 30% of the weaponry that was used in the genocide in Gaza comes from Germany. So, you know, we have our own issues. But I do remember walking around Orange County a few years ago and being arrested by the police because they just couldn't wrap their head around the fact that I was walking. It was just like, you know, it was just considered extremely strange. So yeah, so let's move to the heart of today's of this interview, which is, can you give us I still remember one show where you showed Eminem hosting Barack Obama on stage, or the other way around, right? It was something, and it was during the campaign for the Democratic Party and Kamala's bid to become president. And I just remember thinking how off that whole scene was, how cringy it was, how bizarre it was that neither Barack Obama nor Eminem seemed to understand how cringy this all was. So maybe you can just tell us, like, what is, like, how has politics changed according, as in your opinion, in recent times in the US, both on the Democratic side, but also then we can go and look more closely. Let's start with that, and then we can go more closely and look at what's happening on the right, because surprisingly, that's where it seems to be where the most interesting part of the conversation seems to be happening today.
I think, well, the big thing I'm hearing from a lot of people is that, especially after the release of the Epstein files, a lot of people have said to me that they just feel like the entire system is corrupt, that all of these people, they were able to get those positions because they too are corrupt. And that is the vast majority of them. And that is the reality. I think when it comes to the Democratic Party, more people are starting to ask, you know, why is the Democratic Party not acting like or operating like a true opposition party to the Republican Party? Why is the Democratic Party also supporting genocide? Why is the Democratic Party no longer the party of the working people? Now, don't get me wrong, there are still those that are ride or die Democrats and will always support the party because they believe Democrats protect some of these social policy protections in the United States. But more people are starting to ask the question, like, why didn't the Democratic Party walk away from the pro-Israel lobby? Again, just not being a true opposition party. When it comes to the Eminem reference, I really do. I don't know who's advising some of these politicians in the Democratic Party, but the celebrity use was very cringe because it doesn't speak to the working class people. It doesn't speak to people, the vast majority of Americans, because we don't know those people. We're not in the same class as Eminem. We don't rub elbows with them. You parading celebrities around on stage, all that kind of says to a lot of us is that you're not speaking our language. You're not speaking to us. You're showing us that you're in the same bubble as celebrities, and we know that we're not. And so it shows, again, not willing to have that outreach to the working class, which is a big part of the base of the Democratic Party. And I think for many people, that was a turnoff. And so I think they just don't get that. Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, they're in a bubble that we are not a part of. They're in a different class that we are not a part of. They don't talk to people like me. They don't talk to, those of us that are not in that DC bubble, that are not celebrities. They didn't even really want to go onto a lot of the independent media podcasts. So that right there tells you just how much is going there. It's unfortunate. It wasn't always this way, but the Democratic Party has basically become the party of Goldman Sachs and the military industrial complex. It's no longer the party of we're going to be there for the working class. We're going to be there for the workers. I can't remember the last time the Democrats, with the exception of the American Rescue Plan, at the time that was during the pandemic. So they did pass that American Rescue Plan, and then they ended it earlier than it was supposed to be. That included the child tax credit. With the exception of that, I don't remember the Democrats doing these policies that really changed the lives of the working class people. When people talk about that, they're talking about policies that were implemented before I was even born, like Medicare, for example. These things happened a long time ago. You have to go back to FDR to point out these policies that benefited the working class. So that just goes to show you how much the party has changed. And I think the Gaza situation and now the Iran situation has really woken up some people in the Democratic Party, the voter base, and they're starting to ask, like, wait a minute, what is happening here? Why are you not an oppositional party?
Mhm. Yeah. No, I definitely saw that turn. As a voter myself, having American citizenship, I I decided to vote not in a pragmatic way, not for the result, but just to start building something that will hopefully one day change the bipartisan, this sort of two party system, which is so detrimental to most Americans. Like you were mentioning how much it's not making any difference for people's lives who aren't rich, and yeah, it seems that like there's so many studies that show this, that it just doesn't change anything for regular folks. So can you tell us, like, after October 7, I thought that if it came from anywhere, change regarding the stance of the U.S. on Israel and sort of the influence of Israel would be affected coming from the left. I that's what I thought would happen if anything happened. To be honest, I didn't have much hope that anything would happen. But what I surely didn't expect is that the break and the most sort of significant change, which is turning into, I would argue, the most significant political phenomenon in recent years, which is the sort of this kind of civil war that has emerged on the right around Israel. Can you tell our audience what exactly is happening and what form is it taking?
Yes. So some of the conservative commentators here in the United States have been very vocal against Israel, against not just the genocide in Gaza, but also the war in Iran. I did not expect this either. I was very surprised by that. The first person I saw that was a podcaster that was vocal about this was Candace Owens, and that was when she was still a part of the Daily Wire. So that was before she left the Daily Wire and she started criticizing the genocide in Gaza. It's part of the reason why they decided to remove her from the
Cancel
Daily
her, yeah.
Wire, right?
Mhm.
So she was the first that kind of stepped out on that ledge to criticize this and say that this isn't right. And then after that, others started to follow, right? So Tucker Carlson started to become vocal against it. And I continue to see him go further and further because now he's starting to ask questions like, why are people asking me if Israel has the right to exist? What do you even mean by that? He's starting to criticize further. He's calling out Donald Trump by name. But in the congressional lane, Marjorie Taylor Greene decided to call this out and call out Donald Trump by name. pretty early on, and ultimately decided to resign from Congress because she said she's not going to be able to get anything done. And also, there were threats that were made towards her family. She is still active on the outside. She is trying to collaborate now, apparently, with Congressmember Ro Khanna from the Democratic Party to build some type of a populist coalition in the United States. And they just interviewed together on CNN about that. So she left Congress, but she's not silent. She's still trying to do things. I could have never seen this coming in a million years. What I will say is, what I do hope is that this has to extend beyond Donald Trump, right? So some people on the right think that the solution should be just to get Donald Trump out of office and let JD Vance handle things. And I want to warn people that JD Vance is just as corrupt, as much a puppet. He's a creation of Peter Thiel, who's another billionaire. He's 100% backing these wars, 100% supports the surveillance state. So he's not different. He's just not as crass as Donald Trump when he approaches it, right? So he's a little bit more professional about it when he talks about it. So I hope that the goal here is to not just replace him with JD Vance and then go back to just kind of being silent about these things. This is a systemic problem. This problem with the donor money, this problem with supporting Israel at all costs, this is not a partisan issue. Both parties are, implicit here, both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think more people are starting to see that. I will say on the left, and I don't consider the Democratic Party to be left. The Democratic Party is a center right wing party. But on the true left, like the socialists, the Marxists, those left, of the Democratic Party, those voices have been loud. Those have been a lot of the people out in the streets protesting, right? Whether it's been Code Pink, members of Code Pink, members of PSL, like many of them, Answer Coalition, they have been very loud. When it comes to the politicians in Congress, I think the loudest voice was probably Rashida Tlaib, right? So she's directly affected here, and they try to do everything that they can to shut her down. She was censured in Congress because they didn't want her to speak out for the Palestinian people. It's just absolutely insane. This was definitely a moment where the Democratic Party really, really, really could have taken up the mantle here to prove that they are an oppositional party. Hakeem Jeffries, all the rest of them should be just as vocal as Marjorie Taylor Greene is, just as vocal as Tucker Carlson is, but they're not going to because they're also bought by the lobby.
Yeah, I should frame this for our French audience. The people that you just mentioned, Hakeem Jeffries, which is sort of mainstream Democrat. You said the center right, which to me it sounds exactly right. In France, I would argue he would be comparable to Mr. Faure, who leads the Socialist Party, which to me looks increasingly like the Democratic Party. So it's not really socialist at all. So there's all these nuances. In France, the only party that is truly left is La France Insoumise, and so LFI, and that party is doing very well. But it's fascinating to watch how there is not a single mainstream media that does not tear it apart. Every time they open their mouth, they attack them. Like it's just absolutely incredible. Every media in France, including the media that are supposed to be balanced, that are supposed to be the public service media. So so thank you for mentioning them. So one of the reasons that that this sort of alliance, this sacred alliance that Ro Khanna and Marjorie Greene are putting together, are trying to help emerge. One of the reasons for that possibility, I think, comes from the fact that Americans, there is a move that is increasingly common. Americans are no longer ready to support politicians on the basis of merely what they say, but they support more and more politicians who have skin in the game, who show that they have skin in the game, and who are willing to take actions that, so that's what they're looking for. In France, it strikes me that people are still, they're still really focused on what people say and how people signal themselves and their positions. So I'll give you a very simple example. Many people, especially among young voters, would be horrified if there were an alliance between someone who supported Trump and ended up, even if they ended up leaving his party, and someone on the left. They would say, no, don't go there. That's like, whereas in the US, I think we're at a moment where people just want to see politicians who do what they say and say what they do. How do you feel about that take?
Yeah, especially when it comes to the economy. I mean, people feel the squeeze. I think that everyone talks a good game when they're running for office, but then once they win, they're not. Donald Trump is a really good example. A lot of people believed Donald Trump this time around. I didn't. They believed him when he said he was anti-war, even though he bombed Syria when he was president the first time, even though he killed Soleimani. They believed him when he said that he was going to fix the economy and get it back to the way that it was before Biden was president. They believed him when he said he was going to be America first. Donald Trump so far, and we're the second year in, Donald Trump so far, his policy decisions have been to prioritize Israel and to give them everything that they need. He has increased defense budget, increasing wars around the world, wreaking havoc on the American people, cutting jobs, by the way. They laid off many of the federal workers under Trump and Elon Musk's Doge plan. It has not been America first, but I didn't think it would be, right? So I think that, those of us that decided to vote third party, and for those who are not aware, in the United States, we basically have two main parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. There's a Green Party, there's PSL, there's other third parties, but the Democratic Party and the Republican Party will try to find ways to remove these candidates off of the ballot. So a lot of the money that these candidates raise, they have to end up using it for legal purposes to fight back to get on the ballot. That's happened with Jill Stein. It's also happened with the Libertarian Party. So there are a number of issues that you deal with here. And that's why the third party candidates, people say that they're not viable. So I just wanted to put that out there because in some of the European countries, especially like the UK, they have multiple parties that are viable that people actually vote for. Here, it's kind of seen as a shameful thing among some because the people say, well, if you vote for them, then you're helping Donald Trump, right? But I think instead of saying that, what we should say is that, why are people choosing to vote for neither party? And why is the system built in such a way that doesn't allow these parties to flourish and to stay on the ballot like it does the Democrat and the Republican Party? And I think in the US, people are just looking for a boogeyman. So if they have to blame the working class, they'll blame the working class. That's a big one. If they have to blame those who voted third party, they'll blame them. If they have to blame the people that stayed home, like they'll blame them. They'll blame anybody except for the people that should be blamed. And that is the billionaire class, the people who are buying these elections, who are funding these politicians, and who are keeping everybody else at the bottom.
Yeah. So I should say for French audience, there was a case brought to the Supreme Court. I think it was late 80s or early 90s called Citizen United, whereby essentially corruption at the highest level was legalized in America. And since then, corporations and the wealthiest people in America can use their money as they please to support political movements with, with a catastrophic effect on American politics, as you can imagine. So I think this is a good segue to talk about, there was a lot of, I found it extremely interesting. I find the views of Nick Fuentes, some of them extremely offensive. But I also have to say that I found the arguments made by those who welcomed him on their shows when he did this tour about a year ago, I think it was, and he was invited on all the podcasts. Maybe it was even more recently. And when I remember specifically when Glenn Greenwald was asked, like, how could you invite this neo-Nazi, blah, blah, blah. He said at the end of the day, like, every day you turn on MSNBC or CNN or Fox, and you'll have a war criminal, an actual war criminal who has millions of deaths in some cases on their hands, indirectly or directly, but their decisions have actually had an absolutely astoundingly genocidal or the such effect on various countries. Iraq comes to mind, of course, Afghanistan, etc. And you want me to not welcome a young guy who's in his 20s and who's saying things that you find offensive? Like, how does that work? How do you square that? Like, and I think, since then, I've been regularly listening to Nick Fuentes, and I have to say that while, again, like, there's always a moment where he'll start on a certain subject where he completely loses me, and I realize we are very much at odds. It happened when he started talking about Venezuela, where he basically said, like, he supported the intervention there and the kidnapping of Maduro, etc., which I thought was outrageous. He every now and then he'll say something like, we need a new Hitler. And I'm like, holy shit. But I have to grant it to him. He is the only one who has been attacking as ferociously as he has Israel, and not just Israel, but the fact that the oligarchy, that the Epstein class in the US, which has showed, we've seen in the files, a very strong streak of Jewish supremacist discourse, was part of supporting Israel in the US. And no one else dares to really go there. So how do you feel about this guy?
I think Nick Fuentes is a distraction. It's one of those things. It's like a broken clock is right twice a day or whatever. But he kind of reminds me of Howard Stern back in the day, that shock jock kind of, uh, commentary there, where he says, it's like he says things that are going to create shock value. Like he called out the Epstein situation, but then he came onto his show and he wore Epstein sweater, and he was like, saying Epstein was the man. He was calling out the Democratic Party for years, but now he's going on to Alex Jones' show and he's saying, gotta vote Democrat. Like it just, people like Nick Fuentes keep you in the system, the two-party system that is part of the corruption and allows this to continue. So it's that type of thing. Like he goes back and forth. Like one minute he'll say this, the next day he'll say the exact opposite. So I personally, and it's, people have a right to watch whoever they want, but I personally don't take Nick Fuentes seriously. I think that he says what he wants to say to get like clicks and views and create shock value, that type of thing. But I will say that I think that a lot of younger people who have watched him have kind of woken up to, okay, this Israel thing is a big problem, the hold that it has. on the United States. So I think some people have been woken up by that, and they've been able to take that, from him. I would just also tell those people to, check out some of the people who were talking about this for a long time, like Abby Martin, who's a fantastic journalist. It was Abby Martin's documentary that actually opened my eyes to what Israel was and what Israel was doing. Check out some of those, check out Max Blumenthal, like people who went there, went to Gaza, and they've written books about this, and they can tell you like what they saw with their own eyes and how the apartheid system, operates in Israel. So I think that definitely check out the people who were there on the ground. And they've
Mhm.
had the documentaries and they've written the books, not to say you have to do these things, but it's just they're able to give a perspective that those of us who have not been there, we're not able to give.
I mean, I hear you, and I completely. I mean, I think like there's a number of reasons why one might just say, I don't want to even engage with the circus of Fuentes, um, and I completely hear you on that. I do think that there are too many people, such as Douglas Murray, who've been making the argument that you need to go there to have good, to be listened to. So while, of course, someone like Max Blumenthal or Abby Martin, so respectively from The Gray Zone and The Empire Files, have done some, incredible work and started talking about all these issues like decades before everyone else. And they should be definitely informing our conversation. I do think that there are, and I see your point about Fuentes, about his, is it may, you're right. The clock is right twice a day. But I would argue that while he is a circus, and I find it hard to follow, sometimes, and I see its limits. I have to say that I think he is often bringing the conversation to a place where it needs to go. So, for instance, in the doubts about JD Vance, he's been extremely critical of the association between JD Vance and Peter Thiel, and very skeptical about the resignation of Joe Kent. He I think he's asking some really good questions, including how Tucker might be preparing. You said you feel that Fuentes is pushing us back to the two-party system. I have the feeling sometimes when I listen to Tucker, I'm always shocked by one thing that Tucker does, and God knows I'm so grateful that he is doing what he's doing, and I didn't expect him to ever go there. But I have to say that the shtick consisting in "we're Americans, we don't do that." I'm sorry, like
Yeah.
you built an entire nation on slavery and genocide.
Right.
Please don't give me that. And I feel that one of the things that Fuentes is asking is whether Tucker is not preparing us for the Vance ticket. And I think that's a good question. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, for one, I don't want people to think that, no, I'm not Douglas Murray, so it's not like you have to go there. I just think that, some of the things that he says are true, but some of the things that he says are not true, and they're easily disproven if you look at the work from like Max Blumenthal and Abby Martin who have been there. But I will say that's what I was saying. That's my fear, is that it seems like this whole push is more of a push to move away from Donald Trump, but to move towards JD Vance. And that's why I want people to understand. In fact, you can look this up on Unlimited Hangout. Whitney Webb is the journalist who covered this way back in the day. Whitney Webb revealed that J.D. Vance was the creation of Peter Thiel. And that's how I found out about him. There's a, like, look at all of the optics. There's a movie created about J.D. Vance. I don't know if everybody knows that. The Hillbilly Elegy, that's
Elegy.
about,
Yeah.
supposed to be about J.D. Vance's life. Like, all
He
the
wrote it.
pieces, right?
He
All
wrote the
the
book.
pieces
Yeah.
are lining up to make him look like the golden guy, to come in there, to be the professional version of Donald Trump. But he's just as corrupt and just as much of a warmonger. So I do think that when I hear Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly, it sounds like they're trying to lead people towards JD Vance. By the way, his approval rating just dropped in the toilet. And that's not the answer either. And that's really what I want people to understand. When Nick Fuentes says, well, you gotta get the Democrats in, you gotta vote for them to teach the Republican Party a lesson. That actually doesn't work in the long term, right? Because many people said that Trump 2016, after his first term, the 2020 election, there were many people that said that exact same thing. Got to vote for the Democrats to teach Trump a lesson. Democrats won. Donald Trump came back and ran again and won again. And Donald Trump's presidency, I would say this time around, is even worse than it was the first time. So you don't actually teach them a lesson. The Democratic Party, with Donald Trump winning in 2024, where people said the same thing, got to teach the Democrats a lesson because they started this genocide. The Democratic Party has not moved away from the pro-Israel lobby, what people thought would happen. The Democratic Party is still very much pro-Israel. And they've got this rhetoric out there now where they're saying, well, our tax dollars shouldn't go towards it, so we don't support that. But what they don't tell you is that Israel will still be able to purchase weapons from the United States. That's why they're careful about how they word that. So they're not going to give them they don't want to give them weapons, but they're still going to allow them to purchase weapons from the United States. So this whole teach the other party a lesson thing, from my experience, that doesn't actually work in practice, because they're corporate, they're corrupt, and they're bought off. What these individuals, I would say, should do is they should be encouraging people to mobilize across the United States. They say you need at least 5% of the population to mobilize into a mass movement to push back against the current system. You're not going to fix this corruption by just putting in more corruption on the other side. So I think that's the thing I want people to pay close attention to. And then also there's this idea of audience capture. I mean, let's be real. A lot of people say things that are going to help them maintain the audience that they already have. So I think if they were to say something like, okay, well, we just got to leave this whole system and let's just mass mobilize and start that. Yeah, some people would be on board for that. But for people that tune in for the entertainment and the constant drama of the two-party system, a lot of them would stop watching. So we also have to ask, what is the monetary incentive here as well?
No, absolutely. No, it's very striking how that is and that I agree with you. That's where I mean, I find it so absurd, the idea that the solution to the unraveling of MAGA would be to go with the Democrats. It's just absurd. So but I have to ask you about this, because and not that I'm asking you to position yourself politically, but I thought it was extremely exciting, the candidacy of I was already sort of a fan of Jill Stein's before she picked her vice president as Butch Ware, but I felt that Butch Ware was an incredible jolt in the conversation in the presidential election in the U.S., and that's what decided me personally to leave the two-party system in terms of where I would vote. How did you experience their alliance, and do you think they could be somehow, that they could potentially work with people like Ro Khanna and Marjorie Greene in building this coalition outside the two-party system?
So I did like the matchup of Jill and Butch. I thought that worked out really well. Butch Ware is now running for governor of California, for those who are not aware. But I thought that was a great team. I will say, I think the Green Party, and I've explained this before with Green Party members on my show, I think the Green Party still has a long way to go when it comes to trying to win, right? Because like I told you about the system, how they kick the candidates off the ballot, et cetera. But the Green Party has been around for quite some time now. And it seems like up until the last recent years, it seems like before that, they may not have been trying to actually win. And that's been my critique of the Green Party, which is that this can't just be a social club. If you want to win, you have to actually fight to win. And you know there's obstacles in front of you. You know there's going to be lawsuits to get you off the ballot. I feel as though a party that's been around for as long as it has, there should be at this point enough financial, I would say enough financial backing so that they are prepared to deal with being kicked off the ballot. Does that make sense? So no party is perfect, but I think that the Green Party is going to have to mobilize in a way that it hasn't before. I've constantly said to the Green Party that they need to go into the Black community as well, that they need to get some of these disaffected Black voters that have constantly voted Democrat and they're tired of it, or those that do not vote. That is the number one base for the Democratic Party, is the Black vote. And it just seemed like to me, there tends to be more focus on, in this where a class issue also comes in, right? There seems to be more focus on these areas that are a little bit more affluent instead of going into the areas that are not. So again, this all comes along with partisan politics. I saw the same thing with Democratic Socialists of America, where I see like everybody that was a member of the chapter was pretty much well off financially. Like they were not going into these lower income neighborhoods and communities. And at that point, you have to ask yourself, like, are we really trying to give a voice to those who are poor, those who are lower income? That's something you have to ask. That is something I think Bernie Sanders actually did really well. He went into those communities, right? So I think that's the big thing that the Green Party is facing. With this coalition with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna, I think they could do something like, I know that Ro Khanna would probably be open to having that conversation with them as well. He's one, I will say, again, not perfect, but he is one of the politicians in DC that will talk to people regardless of your audience size. I've seen Ro Khanna go into small channels. I've seen him go into large channels, but he doesn't run away like some of the other politicians. They will run away from you.
Sure.
I could see that as a possibility. And that's the thing. You're going to have to get more people involved. And that also means that people are going to have to get over this whole, I don't want to be a part or even think about this coalition because Marjorie Taylor Greene's a part of it, or I don't want to think about it because Ro Khanna's a part of it. People are going to have to get past that if they actually do want a true populist anti-war coalition in this country.
I think that it's so important because in France, we have the same problem. So LFI, which is the real left-wing party, is often like people in the projects, to just be very direct about who I'm talking about. Like people outside, like on the outskirts of Paris, etc. They don't feel represented by them, and they have a real reservations, and they're still often going to go towards traditional parties that do not serve their interests at all, just because they're a bit annoyed with the hipsters, which they feel sort of is the vibe of this left-wing party. Now, the reason I was also nodding is because I really think that this is so critical that people understand that an alliance is possible between, like, I was talking to a journalist recently who was talking about his media, and he had to fire people or to part ways with certain people that he had been working with, because it emerged that in the past, a long time ago, some of them had been writing for right-wing outlets, and suddenly the young people that this guy was working for were so outraged that he had to make a decision to save his newsroom. And I think that, like, France is always 10, 15 years late on American politics. It's always the same thing. Like when Clinton became a joke in the US, people were still excited about him in France. When, Obama became completely discredited in the US, he's still sort of seen as this, yes, we can, whatever. It still works. And I just would like to point to the American situation and where things are tending, which is a completely unthinkable alliance between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna to sort of do away with this two-party system, find a way out of it. Because in France, we have 10 parties. It's like in the UK. I mean, actually, the UK is more like the US. There's two main parties, which are now increasingly discredited. In France, we have like 15 parties. And the problem right now is that, the idea of finding people on the right who are not with whom you can agree with on certain subjects, like against war, in favor of more equity and justice at the social level, against any kind of supremacy. There's no real faith that this is possible on the part of the people who are with me more on the left, and I think there's a lot of reservations on the right for people on my side of the spectrum. So maybe as a conclusion, before we part, maybe you can just come back on how improbable this alliance is and how it's happening. So maybe there's hope elsewhere.
Yeah. Again, I would have never seen this happen. I never saw this coming in a million years, that these two would collaborate in this way, shape, or form, or collaborate at all, to be honest with you. But I think that takes people on both sides being willing to have the conversation. There's a lot of political tension in the United States, and people have kind of parked themselves in these camps. And I honestly think, had it not been for the genocide in Gaza, I don't think we see this collaboration. Had it not been for the Epstein files, I don't think we see this collaboration. These were issues that affect people beyond partisan, policy. And I think that's the big difference. I will say this: I look at the movements that happen in France, and I actually I'm envious. Uh, the yellow vests, the way all the French marched out in the streets and protested against Emmanuel Macron, like trying to, increase the retirement age. I wish we had thousands or millions of people in the streets here protesting on economic issues as well. So I actually see those types of movements, and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And at the same time, like, we're fighting for a lot of the benefits that France already has. And
Yeah.
so I just, I wonder, like, how could it imagine if we all had universal health care in the US? And I think it just may be a difference of the fact that I live in a country where the government has been steadily increasing the defense budget to over 800 billion trillion at this point. I have to double check it. Um, I live in a country where the government is constantly bombing and practicing imperialism all over the world, um, nonstop. And I wonder, like if I were on the other side, like if I had grown up in France and I had those benefits that Americans don't have, and my country wasn't, not to say that it hasn't, but my country wasn't bombing people all the time and stealing their resources all the time, I wonder if I would feel differently.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, we have a few centuries of stealing people's resources under our
True,
belt in France.
true.
Um, but listen, Sabrina, what an amazing time I've had with you. I'm so grateful that you came on. Um, I would like to encourage everyone to subscribe to your channel, Sabby Sabs. You're available, you're there on a number of different platforms. Um, some of them actually are illegal in France. We don't have a Rumble in France, for instance. But yeah, you can listen to Sabby and get the subtitles, and it's just an amazing show. So thank you for your work. Thank you for being with us, and until soon, I hope.
Thank you so much, Felix.
Thanks. Um,
Bye.
I'm gonna